abandon their grandfather in a terrible nursing home. He escapes and, upon reaching a church, makes an emotional plea to God. A true miracle happens. George, a 75-year-old man, had always led a quiet life in a small town. With a serene appearance, his gray hair and tired eyes still held a spark of life. His granddaughters, Anna and Clara, promised to take care of him, assuring him that he would never be alone. With his health failing, George was convinced by his granddaughters to move into a nursing home. They assured him that they would visit regularly and take care of his well-being. On the day of the move, Anna, trying to hide her anxiety, said, "Grandpa, you'll like the nursing home. It's a very nice place, full of people to talk to." George looked at her with a mixture of hope and apprehension, asking, "Do you promise to visit me often?" Clara, trying to appear confident, replied, "Of course, Grandpa. We would never leave you alone." George sighed, accepting his granddaughter's decision. He knew his health no longer allowed him to live alone, and trusted that the girls would keep their promise to visit him regularly. However, his heart was heavy with the thought of leaving the home where he had spent his entire life. As he prepared for the move, George felt conflicted. He didn't want to be a burden to his granddaughters, who had their own lives and responsibilities. He felt guilty for causing them trouble, while at the same time, a deep loneliness and sense of abandonment began to take hold of his heart. "Am I really becoming a burden?" he wondered as he packed his few belongings. Upon arriving at the nursing home, George looked around carefully. It was indeed beautiful, but he couldn't shake the sadness of saying goodbye to his home. His granddaughters helped him settle in and promised to return soon to visit him. "We'll be back this weekend, Grandpa," said Anna, giving him a tight hug. George smiled, but inside, he felt increasingly alone. As the days passed, he tried to get used to the new routine and make friends at the nursing home, but the longing for his family and home was a constant burden. The first days at the nursing home were lonely. George spent his time looking out the window, waiting for the promised visit from his granddaughters. Each weekend, he waited anxiously for Anna and Clara, but the days passed and they didn't show up. His heart, once full of hope, began to fill with doubt and fear. One morning, while watching the movement in the nursing home's garden, George remembered Clara's words. "We would never leave you alone." He repeated these words like a mantra, trying to find comfort in them. However, reality began to set in, and the promise seemed increasingly distant. After a few days, George began to realize the harsh reality of the nursing home. The promise of care and regular visits quickly faded. His granddaughters, Anna and Clara, never returned to see him, and when he asked the nursing home to call them, his calls went unanswered. The loneliness and abandonment weighed even more heavily on his heart. In the nursing home, George was constantly neglected. The meals were sparse and often poorly prepared. The staff's lack of attention was evident. George's basic needs, such as medication, were ignored. One day, he approached a staff member, his voice trembling, and pleaded, "Please, I need help with my medication." The staff member, without even looking at him, rudely replied, "Wait your turn, old man. We have other priorities." George felt a lump in his throat. The disdain in the staff member's words cut deep. He felt betrayed by his granddaughters and helpless. Each passing day, the deep sadness and loneliness intensified. He spent hours in his room, looking out the window, hoping to see his granddaughters walking through the nursing home gate. But this hope turned into disillusionment day after day. The other residents of the nursing home also shared their stories of abandonment and neglect. George saw himself reflected in them, each with their own battle against loneliness and neglect. How could this happen? He constantly wondered, trying to make sense of what he was experiencing. The days turned into weeks, and the sense of abandonment deepened. George couldn't understand how his granddaughters, who promised to take care of him, could have disappeared from his life so abruptly. He felt guilty, wondering if he had done something wrong to deserve such indifference. On a particularly cold morning, George felt a sharp pain in his chest. The emotional anguish seemed to manifest physically. He tried to call a staff member, but was ignored. Desperate, he got up and went to the infirmary, where he was met with disdain. "What do you want now?" asked a nurse impatiently. George, clutching his chest, replied with difficulty, "I'm feeling a strong pain. I need help." The nurse, visibly irritated, rolled her eyes and said, "Sit down and wait. I'll see what I can do." Sitting in a hard chair, George felt hot tears streaming down his face. The feeling of helplessness was overwhelming. He remembered the happy moments with his granddaughters, the laughter and the promises that he would never be alone. Now, everything seemed like a distant memory, almost like a dream fading away. George, increasingly desolate due to the neglect and mistreatment at the nursing home, began to form bonds with other residents who shared their stories of abandonment and suffering. He met Martha, a woman with gray hair and eyes full of sadness, who had been left at the nursing home by her children years ago. Their friendship became a comfort amidst the daily torment. One afternoon, as the two talked in the garden, George expressed his indignation. "We don't deserve to be treated like this," he said, his voice laden with emotion. Martha, looking at the horizon, replied, "We have to find a way out. This isn't living." Martha's words resonated deeply with George. He realized that he couldn't stay there, subjected to such mistreatment. He needed to find a way to escape and regain control of his life. Over the next few days, George and Martha began planning an escape. They carefully observed the staff's movements, looking for an opportunity to leave the nursing home unnoticed. Meanwhile, other residents, seeing George's determination, started to join him. Each shared their stories, strengthening the feeling of solidarity among them. James, an elderly man with a raspy voice, recounted how his children had left him at the nursing home and never returned. Mary, a lady with a trembling gait, spoke of the pain of being forgotten by her grandchildren. Each story reinforced George's resolve to escape. "We need to be quick and discreet," George said during a secret meeting in Martha's room. "If we act together, we have a better chance of succeeding." Each day, the tension grew. The nursing home staff continued to treat them with disdain, unaware of the plan that was unfolding. Despite their fear, George and Martha remained firm in their determination. On a cold night, while everyone slept, George and Martha decided it was time to act. "Today is the day," George said, his heart pounding. Martha nodded, her eyes shining with a mixture of fear and hope. They sneaked through the dark corridors, avoiding the few staff members who patrolled at night. When they reached the exit gate, they felt a chill run down their spines. It was now or never. With trembling hands, George tried to open the lock quietly. "Hurry, George," Martha whispered, nervously glancing around. Finally, the gate opened with a slight creak. George and Martha slipped through and ran towards freedom. As they escaped, George looked at Martha and said, "We did it. We're free." George was dropped off by the